Joining us now is Glenn Gerstell. He's the former general counsel at the National Security Agency, now a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Glenn, thanks so much for being here with us tonight. This is being called the largest IT outage in history. I don't remember anything else this big. Would you categorize it that way?
I think so, at least in terms of the number of people affected, in terms of their personal life, their commercial life. This is probably going to be the biggest single computer incident in terms of overall effect. Maybe not the number of computers, but the impact on people's lives, as we just heard, everything from hospitals to airplanes to banking transactions. And I think, of course, the rich irony here is that this was caused by a company whose sole purpose for being is to provide cybersecurity services to big companies around the world. The one thing they had to do, and that's exactly where the mistake occurred.
It is deeply ironic. And, you mentioned these software updates. We get those on our phones, our laptops. These are things that people are familiar with. But this one went so wrong in such a big way. How did that happen?
We'll know the answer to that probably after a series of investigations, whether they're by the Department of Homeland Security or Congress, who's already started, a number of members of Congress have already started pounding the table, demanding answers, as you would expect with an outage of this significance. But whether it was a failure of Cloudstrike to properly test the update beforehand, perhaps they were rushing to get something to market, perhaps they thought they didn't need to test it because it was very similar to an old update that they'd already done that was okay, and maybe this one, they thought they didn't have to go through a full testing process. We'll find the answer out to that at some point, but clearly there was a very significant error here.
Yeah, and our lives are so dependent on tech now. I mean, it became abundantly clear, right? And you talk about things like banking. I mean, people get nervous when it's about their money. Should people be worried about how impactful this was on things that are deeply personal to them?
Well, there's no sign that this was caused by malevolence. This was just seeming an error. Of course, there's always the potential that there could be copycat attacks, copycat efforts by Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, who could try to reverse engineer this exploit and use it to their advantage, of course. But right now, I think all this is an outage that has basically turned computers into bricks around the world, and they need to be rebooted and restarted. The other alternative is taking a hammer to it, and that may provide some emotional satisfaction for a minute or two, but isn't going to solve the problem. But individually, to go back to your question, I don't think the average individual needs to worry about their banking transactions being affected by this particular outage.
Right. And what about, does Congress play an oversight role in all of this, or was this just simply a mistake that happened?
Well, there's two answers to that. So the immediate problem is a mistake by a company whose responsibility is to provide secure updates to its customers around the world. And by the way, this company, Cloudstrike, provides cybersecurity services to about 300 of the Fortune 500. So no surprise that an error or mishap on their end has global ramifications. We're going to see over time exactly what the role of Congress is here. Clearly, there's going to be increased calls for more regulation, more liability. I don't know that that's completely the right answer. I think we just need to recognize that we have not spent anywhere near the amount of time and energy and money on resilience and backups and better defenses. And we've just assumed all along that lightning won't strike. Well, in this case, it did.
Do you think is something like this going to happen again? It sounds like that now would be a good time to maybe think about better backups.
Well, we're too far gone. We're 20 years into this particular internet and the structure and the backups. And so we're not going to be able to change the underlying fragility and architecture of the internet and the way digital systems communicate and the way updates are delivered, in particular by third parties who you just have to rely on. You just have to accept an update to your phone or your computer. You don't really know what's in it. It's sort of too late to change that system. I guess the analogy I might use is if you had a bridge that collapsed, you might rebuild it with better steel and make sure it's stronger, and we certainly should do that. But if the underlying foundations, if it's just not practical to rebuild them, you're going to be stuck with them. And I'm afraid in this particular case, we're going to be stuck with inherent fragility of the internet and our digital system. We can do more to protect ourselves, But at the end of the day, this kind of thing might well happen again.
And I just want to ask you too about this reporting that hackers are already taking advantage of this. They've set up phony URLs meant to appeal to people who are obviously trying to get more information about how to fix this, get solutions. What should people be on the lookout for? And it seems unfortunate, but this seems like the reality in these situations. Hackers want to take advantage.
After every one of these outages, criminals jump on it and create spoof websites that mimic CrowdStrike's own websites. And maybe it says, I don't know, I'm making it up, CrowdStrikeFix.com. I'm just making that up. In this particular case, the people who would be drawn to that are not the average consumer, because the average consumer's computer wasn't hit by this. Presumably relatively sophisticated IT personnel at companies are engaged in fixing this. So I don't know that those spoofs in this case are going to be all that important, but you could see how that could, in other situations, be a big problem. And then lastly, foreign countries such as Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, our adversaries in the cyber realm, they're going to look at this kind of bug, see if they can replicate it, reverse engineer it, and use it in their nefarious activities in the future. So we've got to be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Glenn Gerstell, thank you so much. Good to have your expertise. We appreciate it.